Hello everyone. I've seen a lot of people use Python for a lot of things, but they do not use it for object-oriented programming. At least that's what I've seen in my experience. So today in this video, I want to introduce object-oriented programming with Python. So this is good for beginners. I will try to explain all the concepts and then show you an example. Before discussing object-oriented programming, let's first discuss what procedural programming is. So, the usual way of writing software where the main focus is on writing the procedures are basically a function that takes in something and does something and gives something back. So, that's basically procedural programming. Let's create a new file here, and then procedural programming is something like you start writing something, we start writing function that takes some input, some input one, and then return something. So this is a procedural programming approach. The main focus here is to create procedures, but this does not help you scale. Let me give you an example. So imagine we're working on a big social media website or something, and we're using procedural approach, and then we decide that we're gonna work with a customer's name, customer's address, and then the email address. And then let's try to come up with an example. So we create customer and then name, address, email, something. Initially, name will be stored maybe a string. This will be a string, address will be a string as well. This will be a string as well. So we created some things like create customer and like delete customer, maybe like update, things like that. So we basically, what I'm trying to show here is like we basically have a lot of functions that are surrounded with these three sets of inputs. So, and then imagine a situation when the management or they decide that, hey, we're gonna be storing the customer's phone number as well now, and just a little change, we're not gonna store just one email address. This could be a person could have many email addresses, so now onwards we're gonna use it in a list. Now imagine the situation when we have to go back and change every method out there. That's not just like a whole bunch of added work, but this also leaves some space for bugs to creep in the program. Now that could all be solved using object-oriented programming. So what is object-oriented programming? Object-oriented, like in procedural programming, we're centered on writing methods in here. In object-oriented programming, we're focused, like our main focus is on writing objects. So what are these objects? So what are objects? Objects are basically an abstract data type. It's kind of a data type which could include data, attributes, and methods. So data attributes is basically the different variables which you can use to store, to reference data, and methods are basically the functions which you can use to change your data attributes. and so on. So in our previous example, so if the situation where the phone number was also captured and the email addresses were saved using a list and not a string, that could have been easily solved using object oriented programming, because in object oriented programming we do not need to know how the object is implemented. We just need to know what the object does. We are not worried about how, but we only know what. So we'll see that in an example in a few minutes. But before that, let's talk about a few advantages we get by using object oriented programming, or OOP. So the first one is encapsulation. So what encapsulation means basically is an object combines data and code into a single entity called object. So that's encapsulation. It's basically encapsulating data and data attributes and methods together, and data hiding. So what it basically means is, because if you are using an object, you do not see the data attributes but only see the publicly available methods, that hides a lot of implementation details and everything. So what this does is, it has two advantages. So you can hide your implementation, that's one advantage. The other advantage is it prevents the data attributes from being accidentally corrupted, or so if you cannot change the attributes, there's no way they can get corrupted, right? Third thing I want to talk about is reusability. So basically, once you have, we're gonna discuss about classes later on, but once you have like an object ready to go, you can easily use it in multiple contexts. So you can use a class to create an instance of multiple objects and use it in different situations, or you could also use a concept called inheritance, which we will look at in a later video. So basically, once you write something, you can reuse it. Once like some person looks at something, writes an object, can be reused in multiple situations. So the so before we do an example, let me discuss what a class is. A class is kind of a blueprint. It is not the object, but it is a representation of what the object will do. So basically, it's like, you can think of so class, you can think of it as a blueprint. So imagine you're making a house. You'll first sit down with an engineer and come up with the map, the design, and everything of the house. That is the class. Once you have the designs for the house ready, then you'll know what each room will have. You'll know the details of the house, but it is not the house. And you can use a blueprint to create millions of houses if you want. So the same thing applies for classes. So a class is a representation of what an object has. That means the data attributes and the methods the object could have. And a class can be used to generate multiple objects. So we'll let's do an example. So let us try to write a class which we can use to let's write a class called cards. So that is how you start a class. So just a keyword class and specified by the name of the class. So what this class is gonna do is, it's gonna, we can come up with, it will help us pick a card, let's say. So since we have to use the random module here, because we have to generate random numbers, let's import a module that helps us do that. So there's a module called random. So the first thing in a class is a special method that's called constructor. So what a constructor does is basically when you create an instance of the class, the first thing that runs is this method constructor. So it is a special method, just starts with 2 underscores and ends on 2 underscores, followed by, we're going to talk about this later. So basically what this does is it's a representation of, it's a reference of the class itself. Let me put it here, this screen. So it is a representation of the object, the class. So let's have a value here. Self dot value equals, let's say 0, or actually let's say 1. So whenever we start a card, it will have a default value of 1. Then let's do something. Let's write shuffle, no, pick random. So we define a method that's gonna help us pick a random card. So let's use the random module here, random.randint. So a card can, so including, no, so a card can have value 1 through 52. 52, both of them are included here. Now let's find get card or something, and then return self.value. So when we call this method, it will just return us what card we have selected. So now let's write a main function where we're gonna run, and we're first gonna create an object of the class. So let's say card1 equals cards. So that is us creating an object of this class cards, and we're storing the reference in a variable called cards1. Then the next thing we'll do is, let's pick random, then card1 dot pick random. So it's gonna find a random number between 1 and 52, and then it's gonna send that to the value card. Let's print get card. Let's call the main function. Let's save it at card op something. Now if I run it, if I go run module, get card is not defined. Oh, I have to do card1 dot get card. Sorry about that. So we got a 1 this time. If I run this again, oh, I have to do self. Yeah, I forgot to. I was meaning to do this, and then I was meaning to do self dot value equals car, but I forgot to do that. So let's run it this time. I got a 5 this time. Let's see if this works. I got a different card this time. Again, I got a different card. So that is how it works. So that is basically how you create an object. So when you create an object, so what happens is a reference for the for this class will be created. So that is basically an instance of this class, which is an object, will be created, and this method will be, so this constructor method will be called, which sets the value of it to be 1. So if I do not run this, and just like if I just create an object, so it will have a default value of 1, right? As you can see, if I run it again, I'll get the same thing. So this is the next, and the next thing is we're calling the pick random method and passing it something. Notice that this function, or this method to be precise, it takes self as an argument, but we're not sending it in here. But how does it work? It works because Python, it includes the reference to this object as the first argument in here. So card1, the reference to card1 will be passed to variable self, and then based on that it finds the value attribute and changes it. But this is not a pure object-oriented Python, because in pure objects we do not change, like we do not make the attributes public. Let me show you what I mean here. So if I do card1 dot value, let's say I'll do something like this. No, it is changing. So if it was a program running, it would never give us that value of 100, but since you are leaving the attributes exposed, now we give, like, this is what the corrupting of data attributes thing I was talking about earlier. So this is not what we want. We want the attributes to be private and the methods to be public. Notice we could have like private methods as well, but let's not worry about that right now. So how can we prevent things like that? So how can we prevent users from accidentally changing our data attributes? There's a very easy fix. Just add 2 underscores in front of it. That is what makes it private. So let's do it here as well, and here as well. Now what will I get if I run this? Oh, I'm sorry again. As you can see, this did not work because the attribute is no longer no longer public. That means you cannot change it like this. So this is what you can do to make it pure object-oriented programming. Attributes are private, hidden from the user, and the methods are exposed. So now let's say we do not want to return the actual value, but we want to return maybe 0 for, maybe we want to, like, come up with the face of the card here. Face is equals to self dot underscore value so that is the face, and the value is self dot value 13. And let's say if it's a 0, we're gonna make it a 1. If it's a 10, if it's 11, we can make it. So if so let's do clubs, heart, diamond, what's the final one? Club A, club, heart, diamond, spade. I'm sorry, spade. And values is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 9, 10. J, Q, K. Alright, so return, what we'll do is faces at face plus values at value. Let's make this two strings. I don't have to make that a string because that is automatically a string, but this one could be something else. So I changed the implementation here, but the user does not even know what changed. So heart of 7. Spade of J. So we could, bring some Unicode. Let me Unicode. Instead of using like heart. Oops. So basically you can like, if you want, you can bring Unicode symbols for heart, clubs, and then this one will be even better. So that is my very quick introduction to object-oriented programming using Python. Hopefully this helped you learn something. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye bye.